Not all who read lead, but I've never met a leader who doesn't read. The same can be applied to wealth and success. While not all people who read are wealthy, I've never known a man who is wealthy and doesn't read. To counter that point, I know plenty of stupid people who read. They just read the wrong things, that enforce the wrong worldviews and the wrong perspectives. Reading the right books will make you a better, smarter, more successful, and even a more motivated man. It'll increase your chances of succeeding in life, of being tougher, better, and more powerful. The books in this list are a must-read for any man, and especially any ambitious man. They'll help you think more clearly, more rationally. They'll instill correct worldviews. That, with willpower, you can achieve anything while also helping you understand history, how the world works, and how to succeed in any situation. They'll increase your chances of winning in whatever area of life you choose to pursue. So let's get right into it. Ten books every man must read. The first is The Fish Who Ate the Whale by Rich Cohen. This is one of the best success stories I've ever read. It's entertaining, well written, punchy, inspiring, and it will shape what you go after and try to attain in life. One of the best lines of the book, talking about a young Samuel Zemurray, which is the main character and who the book's written about, is this: "From the beginning he had nothing and was hungry for success. He wanted what you took for granted." I'm not going to tell you what the book is about specifically, or who Samuel Zemurray is. Just read the book. That hunger that I just talked about is the American dream. It's what helped immigrants come from absolutely nothing, even knowing no English, to arrive in a new land with freedom their birthplaces didn't have, and rise to heights men born with a lot more never achieved. Even within his rise, Zemurray faced obstacles that would have turned back almost every man on the planet, yet he pushed forward. It's a book about ambition, risk, hard work, persistence, and seeing opportunities where others saw nothing. Next book on this list is Charlie Munger's Almanac. How we think, how we see problems, how we see the world determines much of our success, degree of happiness, and the quality of life we lead. The more rational we're able to be when it comes to making decisions, whether it's in relationships or business, the better quality these decisions will be. For example, when we make decisions, we often apply previous events to the current decision we're trying to make. Sometimes, though, these previous decisions that we use to make this current decision don't belong in the decision-making process. Our personal history can lead us to make horrible decisions. That's just one thing you have to be aware of. Not every situation is the same, though they may have surface similarities. There are tons of these little mental models that help you make better decisions, and Charlie Munger is one of the best clear thinkers you can read about or listen to. The man has a great brain filled with unique wisdom and clarity. His almanac is a must-read for any investor, obviously, but also any person who wants to become wiser. Age doesn't necessarily bring wisdom. We can draw the wrong conclusions from past decisions and events, and many spend a lifetime doing so. Seeing the world more clearly, more rationally will bring wisdom, and this book is a must for that fact alone. Here's some quotes from the book. "In my whole life, I have known no wise people over a broad subject matter area who didn't read all the time. None. Zero. You'd be amazed at how much Warren reads," Warren Buffett, his business partner, "and how much I read. My children laugh at me. They think I'm a book with a couple of legs sticking out of it." Next quote: "Spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up, day by day, and at the end of the day, if you live long enough, like most people, you will get out of life what you deserve." Next quote: "There is no better teacher than history in determining the future. There are answers worth billions of dollars in a $30 book." Speaking of history, this next book is the best history book I've ever read. It's called The Lessons of History. "Most of history is guessing, and the rest is prejudice." Next quote: "Normally and generally, men are judged by their ability to produce, except in war, when they are ranked according to their ability to destroy." This is the best history book I've read. It cuts history into different topics and gives you insight into human nature, what has worked in history and what hasn't, what history actually is, and it shows you that whatever you're dealing with right now, it really isn't anything new. Socialism, for example, has been tried for over 4,000 years. It's nothing new. Yet it's never worked for a sustained period, in part because it takes away individual incentive to succeed. It gives power to the ruling class who hasn't earned it, rather than giving it to people who have earned it. It's a study of history devoid of opinion, with the understanding that history is only written about the events that stand out. But daily life in history is never actually a part of written history. Thus, the history we read is merely a blip in time, a dramatic event that doesn't convey everyday life. This book is a clear look at the roles different things like religion, the economy, government, different forms of government, and many others have played on history, affected history, and you come out of the book wanting to reread it, but smarter too. You'll understand how humans work, how governments work, which governments work best, and so on. You'll see things just a little more pragmatically. A repeating aspect of history is the collection of wealth. That 10% of the population will hold 90% of the wealth, and it doesn't really matter which political system is in place. 10% of the population will have 90% of the ability, which can in part explain why 10% holds 90% of the wealth. The same laws apply to nature, but you see how they apply to humans in different forms and areas. The title of the next book is The Gambler: How Penniless Dropout Kirk Kerkorian became the greatest deal maker in capitalist history. We need to see evidence of men who've come from nothing to become one of the most successful men on the planet. We need to see the evidence that it can happen, and that it's will and intelligence and drive, not luck and chance, that bring these men who started with nothing to greatness. This book will show you what it is to truly risk. It'll show you what it is to go all in on a very calculated hunch, how an immigrant who came from nothing can become a billionaire. Now, about risk. Few of us take enough risks. Big enough risks, or any risks at all. Forget about building the life you want to build. Risk is life. By not taking risk, you're essentially risking everything by guaranteeing mediocrity. We think risk is dangerous, but not taking risks is far more dangerous because you're opening yourself up to greater risk, like the economy, this job that you have that may not last. In seeking security, you're inviting more uncertainty. Why not risk it all? You'll build yourself back up if it fails. Why not swing for the fences? You can hit a home run, or you strike out and you'll get another at bat, another chance if you just keep working. Read this man's story. Read this book. It'll give you insight into both what's possible, and it'll shine a light on the role risk ought to play in your life. The next book is by maybe my favorite author. It's called ANTIFRAGILE by Nassim Taleb. Some quotes from the book. The psychologist Gerd Gigerenzer has a simple heuristic. Never ask the doctor what you should do. Ask him what he would do if he were in your place. You would be surprised at the difference. Next quote. Difficulty is what wakes up the genius. Next quote. This is the great tragedy of modernity. As with neurotically overprotective parents, those trying to help are often hurting us the most. Next quote. Suckers try to win arguments, non-suckers try to win. I have 2 Nassim Taleb books on this list because Nassim Taleb will help you form a better worldview, because he'll help you understand truth. Taleb is a genius, a master at deciphering data, studies, and history. He's able to see what is true. He sees what is, not what he wants to see, and he talks like a man, not some fluffy intellectual. He actually lives and practices what he preaches. He's made likely hundreds of millions, read more than possibly any human on the planet. Antifragile is a word he came up with because there wasn't a word to convey those systems and organisms or even companies that actually grow amidst catastrophe. While a human may be fragile, humanity is anti-fragile. The fragile thrive when times are good, but there's a lot that can crush them. The robust survive in times of catastrophe, but the anti-fragile grow and thrive on catastrophe. The book is punchy, filled with anecdotes and knowledge that make it hard to put down. Which brings me to his next book, which is one of my favorite books of all time, Skin in the Game. Some quotes from the book. The curse of modernity is that we are increasingly populated by a class of people who are better at explaining than understanding, or better at explaining than doing. Next quote. Bureaucracy is a construction by which a person is conveniently separated from the consequences of his or her actions. Next quote. You can define a free person precisely as someone whose fate is not centrally or directly dependent on peer assessment. Next quote. Courage is the only virtue that you cannot fake. How is it that people who have no skin in the game find themselves in powerful positions? And through relationships developed during their time in office, they leave their political post, their public service post, far wealthier than they were when they came in. They don't suffer from bad decisions. At worst, they lose their job and are hired in the private sector to explain regulations they created while in the public sector. We can't have this. People need skin in the game, especially leaders. As a side note, throughout history, no matter the country, no matter the time period, kings, emperors, whatever, typically not only were in battle, but they led in battle. It's the same with intellectuals who influence far too much policy, often leading socialists. It's in their nature to take from those who've earned because they're jealous. They get tenure and their careers are secured for life, while entrepreneurs try and fail and try again for the betterment of society, even if that's not their intention, and infrequently get rich because of their efforts. Entrepreneurs have skin in the game, politicians have no skin in the game, nor do tenured intellectuals, who have very little applicable real-world intellect. This was my favorite book by Nassim Taleb, and the first I read, oddly enough. It's the last one he's written. But any one of these books is a must-read for men. Nassim Taleb, for example, has skin in the game. He only talked about a possible market collapse pre-2008 because he was shorting the market. He had real money in this collapse and he warned repeatedly that it was coming. Most intellectuals, even economists, don't have skin in the game. It's easier to macro bullshit than it is to micro bullshit. And macroeconomics is a field filled with bullshitters whose predictions rarely come true, yet whose predictions impact policy. Every one of Taleb's books teaches you how to see truth, to think better, to see the truth behind the lies in history, economics, business, and even relationships in everyday life. This is a powerful book and a must-read for every man. Next book, Farther Than Any Man, about James Cook. Quote from this: ambition leads me not only farther than any man has gone before me, but as far as I think it possible for man to go. It's by James Cook. Most of the success stories of men who've come from nothing to achieve great things occur since the dawn of modern-day capitalism because it's allowed men to rise. Before this, your birthplace determined how you were going to live your life in a far more strict sense than it does today or it has in the past couple hundred years. Napoleon Bonaparte and James Cook are two examples of men who rose despite being born into poverty or not into a position or a prominent position in society. Cook became maybe the greatest explorer the world has ever seen, at a time when men who captained ships in the King's Navy got that title because of who their family was. Men didn't start from nothing to captain a ship in the King's fleet. It just didn't happen. Cook made it happen. This book illuminates you to what real adventure is, to what real danger is, and to what real ambition looks like. You put this book down having been inspired and thrilled. The man lived an incredible life. Midway through his career, he chose adventure over money. He could have captained a merchant ship and made lots of money, but instead, he quit and started from the bottom of the King's Navy, then worked his way up once again to the top. It's an incredible story of will, daring, and what a man can achieve even if he has nothing on his side at birth. Next book is about one of my favorite historical figures of all time, and the book is The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. Quote, "It's not often that a man can make opportunities for himself, but he can put himself in such shape that when or if the opportunities come, he is ready to take advantage of them." Next quote, "Better 1,000 times err on the side of over-readiness to fight than to err on the side of tame submission to injury or cold-blooded indifference to the misery of the oppressed." Theodore Roosevelt is one of my favorite characters in history. He was born into wealth, but was utterly unsoft. What I mean by that is that this man lived a life of constant motion and action and energy. About energy, the more of it we have, the more we do. The happier we are, the more successful we become. Regardless of health, some men choose to have an abundance of energy. What you see from Roosevelt is that it's excitement that led this incredible energy to come to life, and it wasn't actually health. In fact, he was born very unhealthy, but a burning desire to change his fate and his old man's desire not to see his son live life as a weakling led him to adopt a strenuous exercise routine that included boxing. He didn't wait his way out of illness. He trained his way out of illness. The book is motivating, inspiring. It's an insight into one aspect of how life should be lived. Living is a verb. Most people don't treat it as such. They exist. They wait out their days until death comes. Reading about Theodore Roosevelt, seeing him jump from being a rancher, a hunter, a politician, to the president of the United States, and then exploring the Amazon after he was president. And while he was president, he would both practice boxing and jiu-jitsu at the White House. It's inspiring. It's an insight into how life can and ought to be lived. Roosevelt coined his philosophy by praising those who lived the strenuous life, a life of action, of grit, in the arena of life, rather than being a critic, as most men are. The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt is an education in how to live. The next book is Titan. It's about John D. Rockefeller. A couple quotes from this book. Success comes from keeping the ears open and the mouth closed. Next, a man of words and not of deeds is like a garden full of weeds. Next, Rockefeller equated silence with strength. Weak men had loose tongues and babbled to reporters, while prudent businessmen kept their own counsel. I had a lot of preconceptions about John D. Rockefeller before I read this wonderful book about his life, primarily because of what his descendants have done since he's passed. What I found in reading about Rockefeller is a driven but good man who tithed 10% even when he had nothing to give. And he truly came from nothing. His old man left when he was young to go live with his other family. Rockefeller became the man of the house early, and judging by his beginnings, you would never think he'd become the richest man in the world. Not close. But man, he had a great eye for detail, especially with numbers. He took calculated risks. He was modest in how he spent his money. You have to read this book just to understand where he came from and how insanely high the odds were stacked against him. He was easily a billionaire by today's standards, many times over. It doesn't matter where you come from. You have a better chance at becoming a billionaire today than Rockefeller did back then. Many of us go without seeing someone rise to greatness from a starting point like ours. We have no friends who become wealthy, no family members, and our world is filled with evidence that it can't be done. That's where reading becomes so important. The reading man will eventually come across an example of someone who started behind where he started, yet achieved incredible greatness. This will give that man the evidence he needs to push forward with his dreams and to refuse to quit until they're realized. This book will have that effect. The next book is just pure inspiration. It's called An Iron Will by Orison Swett Martin. Quotes from that book. Success is not measured by what you accomplish, but by the opposition you have encountered, and the courage with which you have maintained the struggle against overwhelming odds. Again, this book is pure motivation. If you're ever down or feeling lazy or feeling like quitting, the words in the pages of this book need to be by your bedside. It's a wonderfully laid out argument of sorts that a man's will is what gets him greatness, a good life, success, or whatever. And that each man has access to this will. That a man with an iron will cannot be stopped. There's nothing that can get in his way. He will move mountains to bring to life what he wants to achieve. In reading this book, you're both inspired, motivated, and pragmatic about your dreams. Some more stuff from the book. How many men lack the power of holding on until they reach the goal? They can make a sudden dash, but they lack grit. They are easily discouraged. They get on as long as everything goes smoothly. But when there is friction, they lose heart. They depend on stronger personalities for their spirit and strength. They lack independence or originality. They only dare to do what others do. They do not step boldly from the crowd and act fearlessly. The thing that separates a great man from the mediocre man isn't anything grand. It's not something innate like talent, it's will. Great men simply do as they planned. That's it. Imagine you did everything you decided to do, and rather than wanting to do it, you just did it. You'd achieve so much. If that were habitual, there would be nothing that could stop you, no matter how grand or simple your goal. Get in the habit of doing this, of doing whatever you set out to do in the time frame you want to do it, and you'll live a great life. I put out a tweet the other day. I know dumb people who read, they just read the wrong things, but I don't know any successful people who don't read. The books above give you the right things to read, so get after it. Now, a question. What book did I miss? Tell me in the comments section what book you would have added to the list. List as many as you want, and please list them. I'd love to see some new books that I haven't read yet. If you want me to do another video about this, let me know as well. Take care.